In 1888, in the rural backcountry of Wilkes County, Georgia, a farmer named Ezra Caldwell was digging a well behind his house. At about 20 feet he hit the usual red Georgia clay, then sand, then dense rock, exactly as expected. At 40 feet his shovel struck something that was not stone. The sound was wrong. Not the dull thud of bedrock, but a clean ringing tone, the kind worked stone makes. Caldwell cleared the bottom of the shaft with his hands, and by lantern light he saw a smooth, flat surface, white marble, polished, veined, laid in even slabs fitted so tightly that a knife blade would not pass between them. It was a floor. Not a natural outcrop of marble, but a floor laid by someone, deep beneath the surface, under layers of undisturbed earth that had been settling for thousands of years. Caldwell called his neighbours. Several men climbed down into the well, touched the surface, knocked on it. They agreed on one thing: it was made by hands. Someone suggested widening the dig to see how far the floor extended, and here, according to the accounts passed down through the families of Wilkes County, is where it turns strange. Within a few days men arrived at the Caldwell farm, not locals, well-dressed, carrying papers, citing an authority that rural Georgia in 1888 had never laid eyes on. They examined the well. They did not say who had sent them, and they told Caldwell and his neighbours one thing: stop digging, fill the hole, forget what you saw. The well was filled in that same week. Ezra Caldwell lived on that farm until he died and never dug another well, hauling water 2 miles rather than break ground again. Today there is no hole, no marble floor, no document explaining who came or why. But the question left hanging over Wilkes County is simple. What floor lies under a farm in rural Georgia at a depth of 40 feet? And why did someone with that kind of authority appear from nowhere to order a man to stop digging on his own land? To understand why a marble floor at 40 feet is impossible, you have to understand the ground it was found in. Wilkes County sits in the Piedmont region of eastern Georgia, a landscape of rolling hills, red clay and granite bedrock. The geology here is well documented. The Piedmont is built on ancient crystalline rock, some of it over 1 billion years old, overlaid by soil that formed slowly through the weathering of that rock and the deposition of sediment over enormous spans of time. Marble does occur in Georgia, most famously in the quarries near Tate in the north of the state. But natural marble occurs as massive formations locked in bedrock, not as thin polished slabs laid in fitted courses like tile. A geologist finding marble at depth would expect a solid vein running through the rock. What Caldwell described was the opposite: discrete pieces shaped and arranged by intention, resting on top of the strata rather than embedded within it. And critically, the depth matters. 40 feet of overlying soil and rock in the Piedmont does not pile up quickly. Soil scientists estimate that it takes centuries to form a single inch of topsoil under natural conditions, and while deeper deposition can be faster, 40 feet of undisturbed strata above a constructed surface implies that the surface was built and then buried under an amount of earth that took an immense span of time to accumulate. This was not a structure from the colonial era, buried by a few generations of farming. It was not a Native American construction of the kind documented in the region, which were earthen mounds, not polished marble floors. Whatever Caldwell hit at 40 feet predated every framework that American history had for the ground beneath Georgia. The marble was the first problem, the depth was the second, and the men who came to make sure no one dug further understood both problems immediately, which is the third and strangest thing of all. The descriptions of the floor survive only through the oral accounts of the men who saw it and the families they told. But those accounts, gathered across decades, are consistent on the details that matter. The surface was white marble, or a white stone closely resembling marble, polished smooth to a degree that impressed men who had spent their lives working stone and timber. It was not a single slab. It was laid in sections, individual pieces fitted edge to edge, with joints so fine that the witnesses repeatedly described being unable to slip a knife blade between them. That level of precision is the detail that should stop you. Fitting stone that tightly requires not just skill, but tools, measurement, and a tradition of masonry that does not appear by accident. These were not men prone to fancy. They were farmers and labourers who had built their own barns and chimneys, who knew a natural rock face from a worked surface the way a carpenter knows planed wood from a fallen log. When men like that insist what they touched was made by hands, their testimony carries the weight of people describing the materials of their own working lives. The slabs were veined, the way fine marble is veined, suggesting they had been quarried from a substantial deposit and selected for appearance, not merely function. And the floor was level. The men who descended into the well noted that the surface was flat and true, not tilted or buckled the way a natural rock face or a collapsed structure would be. It lay where it had been set, undisturbed, beneath all that earth. Caldwell and the others cleared only a small section, perhaps a few square feet at the bottom of the well shaft. They had no way of knowing how far the floor extended in any direction. It could have been a small platform. It could have been the floor of an enormous chamber or a buried building stretching out in every direction beneath the Georgia farmland. They never found out, because before anyone could widen the excavation, the order came to fill it in, and the speed of that order is the part of the story that refuses to make sense. The accounts of the men who arrived at the Caldwell farm are sparse, because the people who saw them did not get many answers, but the details that survive are sharp. They were not from Wilkes County. They were not farmers or local officials. They arrived dressed in a manner that marked them as outsiders, men of position, and they carried documents that they presented as authority to halt the digging. No one who told the story afterward could say with certainty which government or institution they represented. Some accounts call them government men, others say they were associated with a survey or a company. What every version agrees on is that they had the bearing of men who expected to be obeyed, and that they were obeyed. They examined the well. They looked at the exposed marble, and then they instructed Caldwell to stop digging, to fill the shaft, and to say nothing further about what had been found. Consider what this requires. A farmer in rural Georgia in 1888, in a county without rapid communication, digs a well and hits a buried floor. He shows it to a handful of neighbours, and within days, before the discovery could be examined, documented, or widened, men with the authority to issue orders arrive from outside the county and shut it down. The same impossible speed that appears in case after case of anomalous discovery appears here too. For these men to arrive that quickly, someone had to hear about the floor, understand its significance, escalate it to a body with the power to act, and dispatch representatives, all in a matter of days, across the distances and communication speeds of 1888. That is not the response of a system encountering something for the first time. It is the response of a system that already knew such things existed and had a procedure for making them disappear. The men did not arrive curious. They arrived prepared, with documents already drawn up, as though the only variable had ever been the address. Caldwell did not discover a marble floor. He tripped a wire. The order itself is the heart of the story, and it deserves to be examined closely because of what it implies. The men did not offer to buy the land. They did not propose to study the floor, to bring in experts, to document the find for science or history. They did not express curiosity. They issued a command: stop, fill, forget. That is not the behavior of people who wanted to understand what was buried under the Caldwell farm. It is the behavior of people who already understood it, and whose only concern was that no one else should. Think about the difference. A discovery that genuinely puzzled the authorities would have been studied, experts would have been summoned, the site would have been excavated, photographed, measured, and the marble floor would be in a museum or a textbook today. Instead, the response was immediate suppression. And suppression is a tell. You do not rush to bury something you do not understand. You bury what you understand all too well, and what you have decided the public must not see. The instruction to fill the well rather than excavate it is the clearest signal in the entire account. An unknown structure is a scientific opportunity. The decision to destroy access to it, quickly and without explanation, transforms it into something else, a thing that was already known, already catalogued in some private understanding, and already marked for concealment. And Caldwell complied, immediately and completely. He did not argue, did not demand an explanation, did not write to a newspaper or a university. He filled the well in the same week and never dug again, hauling water 2 miles for the rest of his life rather than break ground a second time. Whatever those men carried in their papers, it was enough to make a property owner surrender the most remarkable thing he would ever find on his own land, and to keep him afraid of his own soil for decades. Whatever those men said to him, it did more than stop a dig. It frightened a man off his own land's depths permanently, and that fear is its own kind of evidence. The Caldwell marble floor is not unique. Across the 19th and early 20th centuries, accounts surface again and again of buried structures, paved surfaces, and worked stone found at impossible depths during wells, mines, and excavations, and the pattern they form is too consistent to dismiss easily. Well diggers and miners across the American South and Midwest reported striking walls, floors, and tunnels far below the surface, in strata that should have held nothing but rock. In Illinois, workers sinking a shaft reportedly broke into a paved passage at over 100 feet. In other accounts from the period, diggers described cut stone walls and even what looked like carved doorways encountered deep underground, always far below any depth that human construction was supposed to reach. In some accounts the structures were of cut stone, in others of brick or metal, and in nearly every case the discovery was followed by the same sequence: brief local excitement, an outside authority arriving, and then silence, with the site abandoned, filled, or built over. The repetition is the part that should unsettle you. One well digger striking a buried floor is a curiosity. A dozen of them, across different states and decades, reporting the same construction at the same impossible depths and meeting the same swift official silence, is no longer a series of accidents. It is a pattern, and patterns have causes. The men who descended into Caldwell's well were not the first to touch a worked surface that should not have existed. They were simply the latest to learn that the ground holds things the surface world is not meant to know about. The pattern of buried floors connects to a larger framework, one that mainstream history rejects, but that refuses to disappear: the idea of a buried world, an advanced civilization that existed before the one we are told is the only one, destroyed or interred by some catastrophe, and covered over by the slow accumulation of earth and the deliberate rewriting of history. The mud flood theory holds that across the world the lower floors of older buildings sit below current ground level, that entire structures were swallowed by sediment in events the official record does not acknowledge. Walk the old districts of cities built before the modern era, and you find the hints. Doorways that begin below the sidewalk, windows half sunk beneath the present grade, ornate stonework richest at the level that is now a basement. The explanation offered is always local and mundane: a fire, a regrading, a flood. But the sheer number of these half-buried lower floors, scattered across continents, forms the same pattern that the buried structures underground do. A polished marble floor at 40 feet in Georgia fits this framework with uncomfortable precision. It is exactly what you would expect to find if a built environment, a city or a complex, once stood at a level now deep underground and was interred by whatever reset the surface of the inhabited world. The witnesses in Wilkes County had no theory. They simply found a floor where no floor should be and were told to cover it back up. But the pattern their discovery belongs to suggests their marble floor was not an isolated anomaly. It was a single exposed corner of something vast, something that the strangers who came to fill the well already knew was down there. Return to the depth, because the depth is the argument that cannot be waved away. 40 feet is not a casual measurement. In the Piedmont of Georgia, undisturbed soil and weathered rock accumulate at rates measured in inches per century under ordinary conditions. For a constructed marble floor to sit beneath 40 feet of overlying strata, one of two things must be true. Either the floor was built and then deliberately buried under an enormous quantity of imported fill, which would itself be an engineering feat of staggering scale that left no record, or the floor was built at the original ground level in the deep past and then buried gradually by natural deposition over a span of time so long that it shatters the accepted timeline of human presence in North America. Both possibilities are devastating to the official story. The first requires an organized civilization, capable of monumental earth-moving, working in Georgia long before any such civilization is supposed to have existed there. The second requires that polished, precision-fitted marble masonry was being produced on this continent thousands of years before the history books allow for any culture capable of it. There is no comfortable third option. A marble floor does not occur naturally. Polished, fitted slabs are manufactured, and manufacture requires a civilization with quarrying, transport, masonry, and design. Place that civilization in Georgia and bury its floor under 40 feet of earth, and you have destroyed the foundation of everything taught about who lived on this continent and when. This is precisely why the response was not study, but suppression. The floor did not raise a question that science wanted to answer. It raised a question that the established order needed to keep out of sight, and so it was reburied, in the same week it was found, by men who arrived knowing exactly what they were there to hide. Ezra Caldwell lived out his life on that farm in Wilkes County, hauling water from 2 miles away, never breaking ground again. He told the story of the marble floor to his family and his neighbours, and they told it to theirs, and that oral chain is the only reason the account survives at all. There is no marble floor to examine today. There is no filled well anyone can point to with certainty. There is no document naming the strangers who came, no record of the order they gave, no photograph, no survey, no entry in any archive that the floor was ever found. The discovery was erased so completely that it survives only as a story, the kind a careful historian files under folklore and sets aside. and that is the most effective form of erasure there is. Take away the physical evidence, leave no paper, let the witnesses die, and what remains can always be dismissed as a tale that grew in the telling. But the shape of the story resists dismissal. The marble, which does not occur as fitted slabs in nature, the depth, which no ordinary timeline can explain, the speed of the men who came, the order to fill rather than study, the fear that kept a farmer from ever digging again. None of it fits the comfortable version, and all of it fits the darker one, that something was built in Georgia in the deep past by people the history books refuse to acknowledge, and that someone with power has long known it lies down there, and has decided again and again that it must stay buried. The well is gone, Caldwell is gone, the men who came are gone, their names never recorded. But the floor, if the story is true, is still there, 40 feet under the red clay of Wilkes County, polished and level and waiting, the exposed corner of a buried world that was covered up once by catastrophe and a second time by men with papers. The ground does not give up its secrets easily, but it keeps them. And somewhere under that Georgia farm, the rest of the floor is still lying in the dark, waiting for someone to dig where a frightened man was told never to dig again.